Sarah had always liked her quiet treks to work. Every morning, the fresh air and calm streets of her neighborhood gave the ideal start to her day. But on Tuesday morning, that tranquility was destroyed. As she passed past the park, she observed a man standing beside a tree staring at her. His eyes were cold and unblinking, sending shivers down her spine. She shook it off as a coincidence, but the worry persisted. The man returned on the next day. This time, he stood on the opposite side of the street, his stare riveted on her. Sarah increased her speed, her heart racing. Over the next few days, the sightings increased. The figure appeared at various points along her path, sometimes ahead of her and sometimes behind. Despite changing her schedule and taking different routes, he could always find her. Sarah confided in her friend Megan, who suggested she inform the police. When Sarah eventually responded, the officers were compassionate but dismissive. They had little recourse because there was no tangible evidence or a clear threat. Sarah, frustrated and afraid, determined to take action. She began to quietly take pictures of the man anytime she saw him using a tiny camera that she carried around. She started recording the dates, hours, and places of every sighting in a thorough journal. The man was perpetually present, constantly looming in the background and becoming more scary by the day. Sarah's fear of being watched grew into paranoia. Even at home alone herself, she sensed his gaze. Sarah made the decision to confront him one evening. At one of the coffee shops she went to often, she saw him and finally got up the nerve to say hello. Her nerves nearly overcame her as she approached, but she persisted. Her voice quivered as she asked, "Why are you following me?" The man seems really taken aback. "I believe you are mistaking me for someone else," he said coolly, his manner strangely courteous. Sarah's thoughts whirled, briefly questioning her own views. His denial, nevertheless, strengthened her resolve. She needed to know his identity and the purpose behind his pursuit of her. Sarah got serious about her investigation and started looking up information online. Searching every social media platform she could find, she tried to match his face to any profiles. After hours of research, she came upon an old news report one night about Emily, a missing woman who looked a lot like her. A decade prior, Emily had vanished under suspicious circumstances. Sarah looked further because she was curious and uneasy. She discovered that Emily had lived in the same neighborhood and was a writer like her. She became obsessed with learning more as a result of her growing curiosity. She began to sense an odd bond with Emily the more she dug. Sarah made the decision one day to go to Emily's former home, which was now ivy-covered and deserted. She had a déjà vu as she strolled through the unkempt garden. Despite the fact that she had never been there before, the house felt uncannily familiar. The air within was heavy with neglect and dust. She discovered an old journal and old photos in the attic. She was shocked to see that some of the pictures were current and included her. As she turned the pages of the journals and saw how intimately they described Emily's life, her heart skipped a beat. The most unsettling notes described Emily's experience of feeling watched, which was similar to what Sarah was experiencing at the time. The last entry ended suddenly, as if Emily had finally been approached by her stalker. Sarah sensed footsteps suddenly behind her. When she turned back, she saw the man obstructing her path by standing in the doorway. "You're not supposed to be here," he growled low in his voice. Sarah's anxiety gave way to a frantic will. In a moment of distraction, she grabbed a large book and threw it at him, scurrying past him. With gasps for breath, she dashed through the house, out into the garden, and down the street. She kept going till she got to a neighbor's house and knocked on the door, pleading for assistance. This time, the cops showed quite fast and took the man who had been following her into custody. Over the next few weeks, Sarah found out the truth. The man had developed an obsession with Emily and, following her abduction, had shifted his focus to Sarah because of their similarity. The revelation that Emily was her estranged aunt, a family secret that had been withheld from her, was the turn of events that really shocked Sarah. In an effort to escape the nightmare, Sarah relocated to a new city, but she was irrevocably altered by the encounter. It was a feeling she would never get rid of, that someone was silently following her about in the recesses of her mind.